This is 2024's Immaculate. Warning, spoilers ahead. A nun says her prayers at night, but when she's done, she hides writing behind the picture and packs her things. She sneaks out of a secret entryway that passes the matron nun who is sleeping, and she steals a ring of keys out of the nightstand. After unlocking the main door to the facility, she books it for the gate, but she doesn't know which key unlocks the gate. While she fumbles through all of the keys, hooded figures slowly walk towards her from the building, and they incapacitate her. She literally wakes up in the worst place imaginable. For any of you who are terrified of being buried alive, you might want to skip this part. Or maybe you're a masochist. To each their own. The nun calls out for help, but she can hear the others throwing dirt on the coffin. Needless to say, that's the last we'll see of her. Elsewhere, we meet Sister Cecilia as she's stopped by customs at the airport. She's trying to get to the convent we just saw, but the officers try to convince her to change her mind. After getting approved, Cecilia heads out into Italy, and she's greeted by Deacon Enzo, who takes her bags and gives her a ride to the convent. Once inside, Cecilia is greeted by the Reverend Mother, and she's introduced to Sister Isabel, who isn't too happy to see her. Isabel is ordered to show Cecilia around, and she gives her a history of the convent. Isabel warns her that the catacombs are off limits for her, and that her job here is to make sure the dying nuns have pleasant and comfortable final days. So this nun is just hospice, essentially? That's kind of depressing. So anyone who's transferred here knows that they're either a caretaker or their time is up? Can't imagine too many people are happy to be there. Isabel thinks that Cecilia is too sweet and innocent, and she warns her that her time at this convent will be anything but easy. She tries to convince her not to take her vows that evening, but Cecilia is determined to start working here. Cecilia goes to the bathroom after settling in, but Sister Gwen barges in to smoke a cigarette. Gwen thinks that everyone here is a head case or a runaway, and she admits to being both before going her own way. With that awkwardness out of the way, Cecilia dresses to take her vows, and she goes to the ceremony. You know what? Considering the fact multiple people have tried to convince her not to take the vows, I don't think I'd be too keen on taking them. Father Tedeschi greets her at the ceremony, and they begin the vows for all of the new sisters. With the vows out of the way, everyone goes back into the main building to eat dinner, and Tedeschi spends some time with Cecilia when he admits that he was actually a biologist before becoming a priest. Both of them feel like they're answering God's calling, and Cecilia tells him a story about how she thinks she was saved by God when she was younger. Cecilia goes to clean up after dinner, but she hears a woman crying out in the main hall. When she goes to investigate, she finds a hooded figure chanting in the catacombs. Reverend Mother catches her, but she isn't upset. She shows Cecilia an artifact which turns out to be the nail that was in Jesus' hand on the cross. Okay, that's pretty awesome actually. Is this real? I can't find anything about it. Either way, seeing Reverend Mother handling this with gloves should be a telltale sign that something is up. Sure enough, Cecilia passes out while holding the nail. In the morning, she goes to confess, and she assumes that she just got drunk the night before. Something fishy is going on though, because the chamber gets deeper and deeper until the priest is nowhere to be seen. Then there's the jump scare from hell, literally. And it turns out that it was all just a nightmare. Thanks for that! In the morning, Cecilia gathers with the other nuns to start her work at the convent, and after a very trying day, she lays down to sleep. What she didn't expect is for one of the old crazy nuns to show up next to her bed and cut her hair. Cecilia walks back to her bed, but she notices crossburn scars on the bottom of her feet. The next day, Cecilia tells Gwen about her night, but when she finds out more about Gwen's tragic past, she starts throwing up. She's taken to the convent doctor, and it turns out that she's actually pregnant. I definitely feel like that's against the rules in a place like this. Obviously, they're going to take this very seriously, but I'm amazed by how quickly they just believe this is a miracle. Of course, they check her to make sure she's still intact, but still, let's not jump to immaculate conception. Ha! There's the movie title. That baby is definitely bigger than a few nights old, though. Naturally, the convent treats Cecilia like a saint now, and Tedeschi is very excited about the supposed miracle. That doesn't mean that she doesn't have to go through all the normal pregnancy issues such as morning sickness. In her second trimester, Cecilia starts to notice some weird issues, such as throwing up her tooth. She even goes to eat breakfast with Gwen, and she's still not used to the extremely nice treatment from the other nuns. Not all of them are nice, though, as Isabel tries to drown her in the bath later. The doctor checks the baby to make sure nothing bad happened, but even though the baby is fine, Cecilia mentions that she's not doing well, though. Cecilia requests to go to the hospital to see a regular doctor, but Tedeschi and the convent doctor refuse to let that happen. Well, Isabel definitely isn't handling any of this well as she throws herself off the roof. I think it's time to investigate a little deeper. Gwen definitely isn't standing for any of this, and she tries to speak out at the funeral before she's taken away by the higher-ups. That night, Cecilia sits in bed, and suddenly the nearby picture falls and she can see the hidden message behind it. The message is a scripture about how the devil hides as an angel, and she goes to talk to Gwen about it. Gwen never made it to bed that night, and Cecilia goes to find her. She heads for the office where she finds her own file, and she finds out that they've actually been studying her for quite some time. Just then, she hears a woman crying out from the courtyard. She ends up finding Gwen, but she's being tortured by a hooded figure in a dark chamber. Okay, these red-faced hooded figures are terrifying, but so is the crazy nun who keeps popping up behind Cecilia. Can someone please put a bell on her ankles or something? Cecilia thinks that the nun is there to help her, but when she mentions leaving, the nun tells her that it will never happen. In the morning, the Reverend Mother wakes up to Cecilia crying out, and they all rush to her room. Something is wrong, and they rush her to the hospital. The Reverend Mother goes back to Cecilia's bed to pray, and she discovers a chicken body under the bed. It was all staged. Tedeschi gets a call on his cell phone, and he has the deacon stop the car. The jig is up, and Cecilia bolts into the nearby field. She seems to be doing pretty good, but Super Deacon and Super Priest run after her like RoboCop. Obviously, she doesn't make it. The Reverend Mother is furious, and she lets Cecilia know how she feels when she washes her up. Cecilia gets tied to a wheelchair in the catacombs, and Tedeschi explains how they used the righteous nail to get the DNA of Jesus. With that little bit, Tedeschi used his background in science and biology to find a way to impregnate women with the blood of Jesus. He takes her to his laboratory in the tunnels where he kept his failed experiments in jars, and he explains that he's been working on this for 20 years. As punishment, Tedeschi brands the bottom of Cecilia's feet with a cross, and she's returned to her room. By the time her third trimester comes around, Cecilia seems to have lost a bit of her nerve. This baby is moving around in her belly like it wants out right now. I'd say, considering the circumstances, Cecilia is handling things fairly well. She's like a lab rat with sainthood. During an ultrasound session in the convent, the doctor leaves the Reverend Mother alone with her, and Cecilia sees this as her big chance to escape. Celia hits her with a nearby crucifix, and she makes sure the Reverend Mother will never bother her again. Just as Cecilia makes her way into the hall, her water breaks, but she keeps trudging along. Next, Cecilia takes out one of the high priests while he's taking a smoke break. She didn't just choke him. She pulled the beads into his neck. That's that crazy pregnancy strength coming out. The doctor finds the body with Cecilia standing over it, and he rushes to get help. Cecilia grabs the lighter, the holy nail, and heads to the lab to douse everything in flammable chemicals. Just then, Tedeschi arrives, and he tries to talk her out of setting everything on fire. She manages to lock him inside the lab, and even though he grabs her by the hair, she manages to set everything on fire. Cecilia watches as the fire quickly rages in the lab, but just when she thought she was out of the woods, she hears Tedeschi putting out the fire with a fire extinguisher. This girl just can't catch a break. That dude literally manages to put out the fire and bust down the old wooden door. Granted, he's super messed up now, but he gets credit for being able to survive that and keep going. Meanwhile, Cecilia is ready to pop this baby out at any second, and she's hobbling along these corridors like Indiana Jones in his new movie. Cecilia ends up getting lost in the catacombs, but all she cares about is staying away from Tedeschi. He's right around every corner as she tries to find the exit, but she decides to try her luck at hiding in the dark until he passes. Once she thinks she's safe, she turns her flashlight back on, and she finds the body of Gwen lying next to her. Cecilia gets back to her feet, and she tries to find the exit to the maze. Suddenly, she finds light at the end of one of the tunnels, and she crawls into the tight space to get to the outside world. He catches up to her, though, and he pulls her back into the tunnels. He takes a scalpel to perform his own backwoods C-section, and she cries out in pain. She crawls out of the tunnel, and she lets out a mighty yell as she gives birth to her child. After the child is born, Cecilia bites the umbilical cord off, and she goes to collect a heavy boulder nearby. Okay, so this is not a happy ending, but what's sad is we never even get to see the baby. It just lets out raspy breaths until Cecilia puts it out of its misery. Then the credits roll. This was a pretty solid take on a controversial topic, and I'm definitely here for it. While it was a slow burner for sure, it was still a solid thriller if anything. Give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.